Us now is Simon Rosenberg, longtime Democratic strategist and author of Hopium Chronicles on Substack. Simon, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Sure.
You and I both have been waving people off polls for the past year of highly hypothetical polls, entirely of registered voters, by the way, pretty much no likely voter polls last year, which are a higher quality poll. Now that we're in the campaign year, there are polls I'm willing to look at in certain situations. The Globe, Suffolk University, polling New Hampshire in January, when voters are really actively thinking about this, seems to me worth looking at.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, these are informed voters. There are ads running. They have to make decisions on what they're going to do, unlike many of the voters in the country who have lots of time before they have to make up their mind and are really checked out, right? But in New Hampshire, they're checked in. And that poll is very encouraging. And we've seen it. You know, the big poll that I think didn't get enough attention was the New York Times poll, which kind of freaked everybody out back in October. Did an update in mid-December that showed Biden ahead by 2 points among likely voters and substantially in better shape than their poll earlier in the fall. So, look, a majority of the independent polls taken since Thanksgiving have Biden tied or ahead. Trump is not winning in this election. And, you know, it's still very early. So I feel good about where we are. We got work to do, no question, Lawrence. But I think Democrats should be optimistic about what we're going to be able to do in 2024.
And, you know, I always look to you for guidance about how to watch what's coming. What would should we be watching in Iowa and in New Hampshire as we think about November? Because what happens now is not what is going to happen in November. We always need to be thinking about November.
Yeah, I think there are two things in our politics now that are being overly discounted by the commentariat right now. One is the strength of the Democratic Party in election after election, going back since Dobbs in the spring of 2022. We just keep winning everywhere. We keep outperforming expectations everywhere in all kinds of races. That's really good for us and really bad for them. And to me, it's the most important electoral data that really exists today. The second thing that I think is being overly discounted is Trump's awfulness. I think that, you know, right now, you spent most of this show talking about the legal machinations, but we need to start to move this into the political dimension, not into just the legal dimension. And for example, what we already know, that's already happened, we know from polling, when people are asked if he's committed crimes, will it change your vote? He loses substantial support in every poll that's been taken that starts to ask these questions. And look what he's already done, Lawrence. I mean, let's get into the reality of where we already are. A court has already determined that he committed insurrection against the United States. A court has already determined that he committed sexual assault against a woman in a dressing room in a department store. A court has already determined that he committed massive fraud. These things are already known. And I think that when you look at all the terribles and the awfuls and we start introducing them to voters, this guy's going to have a very, very hard time winning the election in November.
As we go forward through the primary season, where there is no real action on the Democratic side of the primary, that means there's going to be less attention to the Democratic side of the campaign. So it seems to be a challenge for Joe Biden about how to get attention to his side of the campaign when there is not a competitive primary.
The most important thing that's happened with the Biden campaign is that it's turned on now. I mean, I think they were a little late. I think, but they're on now. I mean, he's done 2 major campaign events this week. The speeches were terrific. He identified started to develop the language of a campaign, which is different from the language of a White House. And I think the speeches were actually, frankly, really remarkable and very powerful. And Joe Biden's delivery of both of them was exemplary. I mean, it's some of the best speeches that I think I've ever heard him give. He's bringing it. Like, he's ready. He's ready to go take the case to Donald Trump. But you're right. I mean, Trump is still going to be absorbing so much of the daily news hole and absorbing so much of the attention. The Biden team is going to have to do what they've been doing, frankly. I think they've gotten very good coverage in the last week of these 2 campaign events, made news, and I think we already saw in Morning Consult this week, the first weekly track of this year, the first real weekly track, Biden went up 2 points, right? And I think it's as he starts engaging our electorate, the wandering parts of our coalition are going to start to come home. And I think that, it's important for all of us that Joe Biden made it clear right, that he's going to engage Trump frontally and that the campaign is turned on. Let's get going. I think everyone's ready to get going.
The essential campaign question that Ronald Reagan framed that got him elected was, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? And he presumed that the answer was no. But for Joe Biden, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? The answer to that is unanimously yes. What is that? What's that going to mean in November?
Yeah, look, the three basic points I make about the election is that Joe Biden's been a good president, and the country is better off. The Democratic Party is strong and winning elections all across the country. And they have Trump, who is a far weaker candidate than he was in 2020. He's far more degraded. He's far more extreme. He's far more dangerous. His performance, as you saw in the clip that you showed earlier, is far more erratic. He's making incredible mistakes on the stump. I mean, coming out against the ACA and calling for a repeal of the ACA was a massive unforced error by the campaign. And just like this comment he made that you showed earlier about him wanting to crash the economy, this guy is making unbelievable mistakes. And so, you know, he's not the same candidate that he was in 2020. He's far worse, in my view.
Simon Rosenberg, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thanks.